indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call roll?
Yes. Commissioner Alderete.
Present.
Commissioner Calderon. Commissioner McLaughlin.
Here.
Commissioner Chair Morrissey.
Here.
Vice Chair Pham.
Here.
Commissioner Ramos. Present. Commissioner Wu.
Here.
Chair, you do have quorum, and for the record, Commissioner Calderon will be present tonight. She's running a couple minutes behind.
Thank you. Members of the public may attend planning commission meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. I now invite the commission secretary to describe the way the public can access and participate in this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at www.santa-ana.primegov.com/public/portal and to YouTube at youtube.com/City of Santa Ana Videos. If you would like to provide a public comment, you may do so in the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom. Enter meeting ID 972-520-18232. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you entered. You may also provide a comment by phone by calling 669-900-9128. Enter meeting ID 972-520-18232. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press *9 to let us know that you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you are called upon, you must press *6 to unmute yourself. For those who are attending this meeting in person and would like to provide a public comment, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it into the secretary. All speakers will have 3 minutes to speak, and we will alert you when your time is up. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. Madam Secretary, does anyone wish to speak?
If you would like to make a comment on a non-agenda item and you're participating via Zoom, please either select the hand icon or press *9 now. We'll wait a few seconds. We do not have any speakers.
Thank you. Moving on to consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve item A through B, excused absences and minutes from July 12th?
I move, Mr. Chair.
Second. Wow.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Okay, roll call vote. Commissioner Alderete.
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon. Commissioner McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos. Aye. Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Vice Chair Pham.
Aye.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes by majority vote with Commissioner Calderon absent.
That will be the end of the consent calendar, and we'll move on to the business calendar. I'll now review the process for the public hearings so that everyone knows what to expect. First, staff will provide a presentation and answer questions from the commission. The public hearing will be opened. Then the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 15 minutes. Then members of the public will be given the opportunity to comment, limited to 3 minutes. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond to comments made by the public, limited to 5 minutes. The public hearing will be closed. Discussion will return to the commission for formal action taken to approve, conditionally approve, deny, or continue review of the application. Please consider the following suggestions when organizing your comments. A, please state your name and address. B, state whether you support, oppose, or are neutral to the proposal. And C, your statement should include all pertinent facts within your knowledge avoid gossip, motion, and repetition. A clear, concise, and non-repetitive argument is most effective. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 1, conditional use permit number 2021-12 for the property located at 2151 East Santa Clara Avenue. Please note, the decision on this matter is final unless appealed within 10 days by any interested individual or party. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose in regards to this item? Start with Commissioner Already,
No disclosure.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Wu,
None.
Commissioner Ramos,
No disclosures.
Commissioner Vice Chair Finn. And I have nothing to disclose either. So now staff will now provide a brief presentation by Jerry Guevara.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioners. This first item is a request on behalf of Nicole Camacho with Virtual Sidewalk on behalf of the applicant, SBA Monarch Towers, and the property owner, Long Ridge Associates. The applicant's requesting of approval of a conditional use permit number 2021-12 to renew the entitlements of an existing 56-foot high major wireless facility located at 2151 East Santa Clara Avenue. The wireless facility is located within the commercial center located at the northeast corner of Tustin Avenue and Santa Clara Avenue. The wireless facility itself is highlighted by the red arrow. It's more or less kind of tucked away by the existing mini market on the site. Some of you may recall this property was recently improved with a drive-through Starbucks as well as some landscaping, which concluded sometime the beginning of last year. The general plan for the facility or for the actual site is general commercial, and the zoning is arterial commercial. The site is surrounded by commercial uses to the north, south, and west, and residential uses to the south and east. And the lot itself is approximately 0.86 acres in size. This is a site photo of the existing wireless facility. The applicant recently made some minor alterations to the branches, foliage, and the antenna stalks to refresh it before bringing this action to this commission tonight. The original conditional use permit was approved by this body back in August 9th of 2010, which permitted the construction of the monopine with the ancillary equipment. Per the Santa Ana Municipal Code section 41-198.3b, wireless facilities such as this one do require to be renewed every 10 years, for which is why the applicant is requesting the renewal of its conditional use permit. This is a site plan of the existing site. To the left, you do have Tustin Avenue, and to the bottom is Santa Clara Avenue. The wireless facility tower, as well as the equipment enclosure, is highlighted in red by the red rectangular area. In terms of the project analysis, the facility will continue to provide benefit to the residents and visitors of the area. The location is optimal for stealthing and screening the facility. The facility itself would not impact or affect the general plan, and conditions of approval, as well as the maintenance agreement and standards that are listed in the Santa Ana Municipal Code, will continue to address any potential negative impacts associated with the wireless facility. In terms of the California Environmental Quality Act, the project has been determined to be categorically exempt per section 15301, the existing facilities of the CEQA guidelines. And with that, a notice of exemption will be filed with the county. There is no fiscal impact associated with this project. With that, staff is recommending that the Plan Commission adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit number 2021-12 as conditioned. And that concludes staff presentations. I am here to answer any of your questions, and the applicants also participating virtually. Before moving on, I believe we did forward the commission an inquiry or request that was submitted by the property owner, Lance. After speaking to the applicant as well as the property owner, they've requested that a condition be added by the Plan Commission requesting a wrought iron fence to screen off the tower of this facility to prevent any nuisances as well as issues that the property owner has been having with homeless individuals encamping in that area. With that, I'll feel free to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. I'll run through the commissioners, see if they have any questions for staff. Start with Commissioner Alderete.
No questions.
Commissioner Calderon.
No questions.
Commissioner Laughlin.
I have two questions. One is, since this was brought up as a fence around the facility, my first question is, how many is it not a requirement to have fencing around these wireless towers? This time, we have a requirement.
Commissioner McLaughlin, we do have a requirement. Since this is a renewal, we didn't request it because it was not originally requested as part of the original entitlement. But after speaking with the property owner and the applicant, they both had agreed to install a wrought iron fence.
Okay, second question is, what are the facilities such as this have no fencing? What's in the city at this point? You must have an inventory of the towers because we're issuing CPs for all of these. So is there any way to get some kind of inventory? Or we just have this on a one-off basis?
Commissioner McLaughlin, we will have to get back to you on that, but we do have an inventory of all existing facilities within the city of Santa Ana. Most newer facilities that are coming in to be part of approved by this body do require it to be completely enclosed. If you recall, about a year ago, we brought one that was on 1900 17th Street, East 17th Street, and that required to be completely enclosed. So it is a practice of this agency as well as a code requirement that these facilities need to be completely enclosed. It is a code requirement, correct? Code requirement, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Wu.
I have no question.
Commissioner Ramos.
No questions.
Commissioner Fan. No questions. I don't have any further questions. I'd like to call for a motion.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the with the condition of
Oh, I'm sorry.
comment.
I need to open the public hearing. I'm sorry. We did get written communication that was referenced.
Yes, we received one written communication and that was distributed to the commission. It's also posted to our website.
And now I'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the public who would like to speak on the matter? Hearing none, would the applicant like to speak on the matter?
Is the applicant in the audience or are they participating via Zoom? And I see Jacob Hamilton has unmuted himself. Jacob, if you'd like to make a comment, please go ahead now.
I'm the applicant representing the applicant. No, we don't have a comment.
Thank you.
So now I will ask if the commission has any comments or questions from the applicant. Commissioner Albright,
No comments.
Commissioner Calderon,
No questions or comments at this time.
thank you. Commissioner Wong.
Good.
Commissioner Wu,
No question or comments?
Commissioner Ramos,
I have none.
Mr. Vice Chair.
No comments.
Thank you. I have no questions for the applicant. We will now take comments from the public. Secretary, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
If you'd like to speak on this matter, you're participating via Zoom, please select the hand icon now or dial *9. And if you are here in person and would like to speak on this matter, please come up to the podium. We do not have any speakers, Chair.
Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. And I will ask if there are any final questions of staff on the matter. Hearing none from the commission. I will now entertain a motion on the item.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the CBUT with the addition of the fencing.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the condition?
I'd like to approve the recommendation with the addition of the fencing.
So we have a motion to approve conditional use permit number 2021-12. Just to repeat the motion. With the condition that they added a fence around the tower.
I have a motion by Commissioner Wu and a second by Vice Chair Dan.
I would like to add that the fence height match the existing masonry wall that's there.
Commissioner Wu.
I agree.
Thank you.
I can do a roll call if you're ready.
Please, Madam Secretary, your roll call vote.
Commissioner Alvarez,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos. Aye. Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ham,
Aye.
and Chair Marcy.
Aye.
Motion passes by unanimous consent.
Thank you. Please, Madam Secretary, your roll call.
Sorry about that.
Moving on to the work study calendar, please note, no action will be taken on this item. I'm sorry. We'll first do the administrative matters. This will be the annual review of the conditional use permit for Francisco's Hector #1 located at 1801 South Main Street. Before we begin, is there a member of the public that would like to comment on this item?
If you'd like to comment on this item and you're participating via Zoom, please select the hand icon or *9 if you're calling in. Or if you are here in person and would like to comment, please be sure to fill out a request to speak form and then come up to the podium. You can take that one right after you're done. Oh, sir, you can make the comment now, just hand it in.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Arthur Newton. I'm the corporate counsel for Marisco's Hector and its primary shareholder, Maria Siebold. We have reviewed the staff report and are generally in agreement with it. We're happy to answer any questions the commission may have. That's the only reason I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Staff will now provide a brief overview.
Good evening, Chairman and Vice Chairman and members of the Planning Commissioners. As you have in your memo today, it's just an annual review of the conditional use permit that was approved by City Council back in January 21st, 2020. When it was approved, there were certain conditions that were imposed of the project. And this is kind of to bring back and report back that those conditions have been met as indicated in the staff report. Some of those conditions included removing the tinting that was on the windows, which they have complied with. An entertainment permit was also approved back in July 2020 and July 30th, 2021. Offsite parking also is being proposed at 1812 South Main Street, and which will comply with the city's building security ordinance. Also, a property maintenance agreement was also recorded, which was also a condition of approval. That also has been completed and filed with the city. And that was back in August 20th of 2020. And prior to the issuance of ABC license, there were other set of conditions that they had to meet. And this had to do, one of them had to do with noise. So they did submit an acoustical analysis that was performed to kind of monitor the noise. And based on that study, it said that it indicated that when the amplified sound system is reduced to 76.8 decibels, it could be, the sound cannot be heard from outside. And the perimeter wall, the rear wall that's adjacent to the residential uses, it's a cinder block, which typically attenuates the decibel level. And typically it does by 5 decibel level. So it decreases that quite a bit. In addition to that, they obtain a building permit to install a new window system, which will further reduce the noise. And that was done in conjunction when they expanded to Unit D. So that also has been performed and final. Then a 6-month review was also to be done. And there was also, as you know, with COVID-19, things kind of came into a pause. But code enforcement cases from January 21st, 2020 to June 2021 included an unpermitted sign, which the case has been closed. So the business has come into conformance. On December 16, 2020, there was a violation of not adhering to the COVID-19 state orders. And so there was a letter that was sent to the business owner asking for compliance. One of the things that we also took a look at is the service for calls from the police department, and that's also indicated on page 4. So there was an increase of calls for services for service. There were 3 calls received related to noise between the hours of 6 p.m. and 10 p.m., 2 related to fights, 2 related to intoxicated behavior. Then there were other calls received a little later during the night from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. and they were all related to noise. And then calls received after 12 a.m. was 1 related to noise. Additionally, they have provided a security plan, which has been reviewed and approved by the police department Also, currently under the current CUP, they're allowed to stay open until midnight. The business owner had also requested another conditional use permit to stay open longer hours until 2 a.m. That was considered by the Planning Commission on July 28th, 2020, and it was continued. And as you know, COVID hit, things were supposed to be closed, so that still hasn't been come forward to the Planning Commission, and I can only assume that the applicant might still be interested in pursuing that. But the purpose of this report is just to provide you an update of where they're at in their annual review, and staff will continue to monitor. Do you have any questions? Also too, just Bill McGovern with the police department is also here. He's the person who looked at the data, the service for calls, so he can provide a different additional information or answer any questions you may have related to that. And also the business owner is here.
Thank you.
And again, this is not for any action. This is just a report back for to receive and file.
Does the commission have any questions for staff? I'll start with Commissioner Andre.
No question.
I guess my question is to Bill, since we haven't seen him in 2 years. Virtual or not virtual. And my question is, how does this work together? How does that compare with similar facilities down in the downtown area?
I don't monitor each facility to compare. When an item comes up before the planning commission, the planning department will ask me to do a review. So on this specific item, I conducted a review year by year to give them a breakdown of where the calls were occurring at that 1801 South Main. There are several businesses that are there that share the same parking lot. But I wanted to give them an update on the calls for service or the police activity that was generated by Mariscos Hector.
How do you view this? How do you view this results in, or here? Is this good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, I think Mariscos Hector's has been in front of the planning commission several times. A lot of times they get negative comments from their neighbors, a lot during noise, due to noise, and that's been consistent with calls for service.
And the security plan is approved at this point in time at PD?
Yes, that usually comes in with their entertainment permit. So that's in place.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Good seeing you again.
I see you too.
Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner? Well, Commissioner Wu.
I don't have any questions, but the big question of all bars and restaurants, including the last ceremony where we had a celebration, people were celebrating. And he was talking about one particular bar, but I don't know if the part of the issue rather than that's not the big.
Commissioner Ramos.
I do have questions for staff. My question for staff is, has there been any communication with the Madison Park Neighborhood Association? I know in past years when the business has been before the commission, the neighborhood association was very involved and had several comments to make regarding their relationship with the business.
When it comes to the operational, how they're operating, no, we didn't ask. We just take a look at the data. That's really what we're reporting about. But no, we did not seek any comments that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then my other question regarding the calls for noise. So in our staff report, I'm seeing that on July 2nd, 2020, there was a building permit for soundproofing of a ceiling window system. So I'm wondering if that was, I'm wondering if these complaints for noise happened before or after that? And how effective maybe the grouping that they've done has been, and if there's a need to revisit that.
Right, based on the data, it appears that that building permit was final in July 2nd, 2020. And so some of the calls that were received was after that. So perhaps maybe a door was open, I don't know. But typically when you have a new window system plus the cinder block, you probably can reduce the decibel level by 10, which is a lot, which is actually a significant, typically the way that noise works. When you speak out of normal, it could be about 65 decibel levels. And typically when it's an increase of 3 decibel levels, it's really not really picked up by your hearing. But once it gets to like 5 decibel levels, that's when you notice. And so in terms of the numbers, it could be reduced significantly. Perhaps the noise calls were because it happened outside the building, unless there was something open, like a door, I don't know.
If I can also share that over the last year, the city have had executive order allowing for restaurants and businesses to operate outdoors in light of COVID-19 and the government's executive order. So I'm sure there are times when they have activities outside because we cannot operate indoors up until June of this year. So if you look at the complaints, it matches up with activities outdoor. And therefore, staff is recommending that we continue monitoring business for compliance.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Chair, I have questions for the applicants. Could those be asked now or will we come back for another round of questions?
That will come back. Questions, yeah. Mr. Mann, do you have any questions for the staff? And I have no further questions. Thank you. I would like to open it for questions to the applicant. If there are any questions for the applicant. Mr. Already? Mr. Calderon?
I have no questions or comments.
Mr. Wu? Mr. Ramos?
Yes, I just have 2 questions. I'm wondering if the applicant or the representatives can speak to their efforts to reduce noise and noise complaints, and then I'll ask.
Okay. I think largely the noise complaints that you were hearing was due to the outside dining, as the other commissioner said was allowed. The outside patio area has now been removed. So I don't think that's going to present an issue in the future.
Great, thank you. And then my only other question is regarding the business and any relationship or communication that they may have with the neighborhood association. I know in the past, the business had expressed interest in becoming more involved with the neighborhood association.
We have had dealings with them in the past when we've been before the commission. One individual in particular who spearheaded the association. We attempted to have meetings with staff, the association, and ourselves. Be quite honest, they were wholly uncooperative. There was always a scheduling conflict. They didn't want to meet. I think staff could verify the fact that they weren't all that cooperative in the mediation process.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Those are all my questions.
If I could offer one other comment on the police calls. Originally, when we were told that there was an increase, we asked to put some detail. Planning department said we weren't privileged to that information. We did a Public Records Disclosure Act to the police department, and they were very forthcoming. I've reviewed those in detail, and I think, and I'll be happy to meet with the police or the planning department to reconcile our differences, but I think they're slightly overstated. One call in particular, the one after midnight, it was like 3:35 in the morning, Marisco's Hector closes at 12 midnight. There's no way we could have a disturbance in the parking lot that's attributed to the restaurant 4 hours after they've closed. But again, I'd be happy to meet with staff to reconcile those differences.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Commissioner Pham, any questions?
I think following that statement, I'm curious, if ownership would be looking into extending the operation hours, or that's a.
It is being considered, yes.
That
We'll probably be putting in an application in the next few weeks.
see if
Having been a policeman for 10 years before I was a lawyer and relying on some old saying my dad used to have, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be at a crap table in Vegas making a whole lot more money. I don't know.
My concern is, there also serves current operation hours currently, which, and recognition says that provide, in the future, if they're extending their hours of operation, call after midnight. More problematic than
If I can go into the detail on that one call, there's a restaurant, I believe it's El Sawaya, that's across the street, just north of Marisco's Hector. They have a relatively small parking lot, and a lot of their clientele comes over into the 1801 parking lot. So El Sawaya currently is closed for remodeling, but they were open until 2. I'm thinking that call was customers of El Sawaya that were creating a problem. And the police department, to their credit, we're at the 1801 parking lot. It's got to be Marisco's Hector, not realizing the business had been closed for 4 hours.
I don't have any questions for that.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask for a motion to receive and file this report.
motion.
I'll second that. Do we have a discussion? I don't have a discussion on the motion, but it does occur to me as we get a lot of these things. The property owners seem to be compliant, but we also ask a lot of questions about that based on claims that sometimes true, sometimes not true, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes I was wondering if there's a way for us to have some more consistency for the treatment of private. Otherwise, I have nothing regarding the motion.
Yeah, I think that's a policy we need to have a discussion on, develop as a commission.
Chair, Commissioners, I would just add that because this is a receive and file item, certainly questions are permitted in some light discussion, but because there's no substantive action being taken on the item, it really just is a matter of voting. And if there's any differences or any certain protocols the commissioners may wish to see in the future, they can certainly take that up with the staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. I need to start off.
So we have a motion and a second. Secretary, please call for roll call vote.
Yes, and for clarification, who made the second on this?
I think the second was from Commissioner Wu.
And the motion?
No, this was found.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. I'm sorry.
I didn't second.
I heard Commissioner Wu make the motion, so I just wanted to.
Chair,
second.
Commissioner McLaughlin made the motion.
I made the
Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, so roll call vote for that. Commissioner Alderette,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Pham,
Aye.
and Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes by unanimous consent.
That concludes the business calendar. Moving on to our work study calendar. Please note, no action will be taken on this item. Please, before we begin, is there a member of the public that would like to comment on this item?
There's a member of the public that would like to comment on this work study session. If you're here in person, you may come up to the podium. If you are participating via Zoom, please select the hand icon or press *9 now. We'll wait a few seconds. We don't have anyone participating via Zoom, but we do have one member who is here in person.
Is this the work study on the general plan?
Yes.
This is,
Okay. I'd like to comment. My name is John Hanna. I'm here tonight representing the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters. And I'm here to just on the general plan element to say that I want to just talk about one issue, and that's climate change. I think that Irvine passed an ordinance recently that talked about having the focus of almost every governmental action to be within an environmental prism. And in the effects of climate change and pollution, we're seeing that now. And AB 32, which was enacted 15 years ago, established a comprehensive program to achieve quantifiable, cost-effective reduction of greenhouse gases. And the 2014 revised AB 32 scoping plan highlights the importance of local government in reducing emissions to achieve long-term statewide goals. I think your staff's done a great job, and this planning commission has done a great job in looking at projects and making sure in many ways that the construction of the materials, that there's an environmental sensitivity. But in the area of how those projects are actually constructed, Santa Ana has fallen short. I know the staff, and we're working with Ben and others to look about a way to try and facilitate a skilled and trained workforce with a local hire component with regard to the housing opportunity ordinance. But I think this commission should broadly look, as they're looking at the general plan, as you accelerate the ability for construction to occur through the general plan amendments that look like they're headed to the final finish line. More construction will be available. There'll be less restrictions on them. And there's some good things about that. We need housing. But if we don't do things like look at the workforce and try to reduce vehicle miles traveled by having a skilled and trained workforce with a local hire component. So we're prioritizing people who live in Santa Ana and adjoining cities. So people aren't coming in from San Diego or Riverside, and so we're reducing those vehicle miles traveled. Then we're not doing all we can to deal with those statewide goals. And that's what planning commissions and city councils need to look at. So just respectfully, I'm asking you within the discussions here, consider the environment and consider the one space that I'm here presenting, which is the construction, and look at prioritizing Santa Ana residents, students from Santa Ana schools and adjoining communities, and prioritize hiring those people who will also be able to have a living wage and will not need to be subsidized by the government. And I want to thank the staff again for their courtesies and their willingness to work with us in that one space that I talked about. So thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
thank you, Mr. Hanna.
Parking stuff?
What?
A request to speak, please. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any other members of the public? Thank you. So we'll move on to the presentation by staff, Ms. Melanie Camp.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. We're happy to be back again tonight to talk a little bit more about the general plan. And we did have a request to, in particular, talk about the open space recreation component. So we'll be touching on that tonight. So again, we're here to talk about the general plan. We like to use this slide because it's so colorful and vibrant, which is what we hope our future continues to be. And again, our theme here is how do we make the quality of life in Santa Ana sustainable and equitable for all. So as I mentioned tonight, we'll talk about the mobility element a little bit more and the open space element, and then again, go over our next steps. So just a quick flash again of color and the years gone by. It's been a long journey. These elements have been evolving over time for a number of years, and we're glad that we're finally at the decision-making point, hopefully. So again, mobility element. We mentioned before that it's the blueprint, it's the policies, the goals, and the actions that frame how we move our people, our goods, our resources in more complete fashion, and to encourage a lifestyle that's more active while conserving natural resources and helping the environment. So there are actually 5 goals in the mobility element, and the themes are stated here. Comprehensive circulation, complete streets, regional mobility, active transportation, category that's transportation, land use, and design, that combination. And then last but not least, sustainable transportation design. And I'd like to pause here for a moment to acknowledge that Zed Kakula from our Public Works Agency is here tonight, and he'll be happy to join in the conversation along the way as needed. And as well, before I forget, Susie Verjanik and Ron Ono are also here to help us in the conversation of open space. We're really happy to have them here and thank them for their help along the way. So again, goal number 1, comprehensive circulation. So this visual is actually from a bookmark we created when this program started about 5 years ago as we were doing outreach to the public. And so comprehensive circulation is complete to help those that walk, service the autos, deal with rail and train, deal with bikes, bus, and also other things that come up, be they scooters, Uber, the whole complete package is what we're wanting to achieve. The next goal deals with regional mobility, and the graphic that we have up here is actually the map that's called the Master Plan of Transit. So I'll break down a couple of those components. The first one is, as we're all familiar, we have our Santa Ana Regional Transportation Center and the train station. And then, so that's a key component connected to the rail. And then we have what we're calling here is OCTA opportunity corridors. It's actually all those yellow lines. And there are corridors that OCTA has designated as high efficiency, high quality transit corridors with a 15-minute cycle before the next bus comes. And so there are corridors that we are mindful of because that's where the most quality transit will be, the most convenient, et cetera. And so we've identified those on our master plan of transit. Last but not least is the Orange County streetcar, which is in green dots and highlighted with that blue dash mark, which basically takes us from the train station, as you know, up to the Garden Grove Harbor 17th area. The next theme or goal is related to active transportation. So one of the components of that is a policy map that you see here with a lot of color, a lot of colorful spaghetti. And those actually relate to what's right underneath the map. There are different types of bikeway classifications. And the aim is to, of course, provide a safe and efficient system for bicyclers or cyclists, to reduce reliance on automobiles, and to facilitate increasing bicycling as a choice and have it by choice. So again, I'll just touch on those 4 categories. Class 1 is off-road. So the Santa Ana River, the trail that goes through Santiago Park, those are class 1 off-road. And then class 2 is on the road. The old traditional would be you'd have a striped lane and be biking on the street. And we have some newer classifications that this general plan will embrace. It's not in our general plan at this point. And it's the class 3 that are the bike routes and the bike boulevards. And then a new class, again, it's 4, it's the cycle tracks, where you see there's a separated, protected, raised small median that protects the cyclists from the vehicles, which over time has the realization that that's critical, really, for people to make choices to cycle in a safe fashion, particularly on our major streets. The next category, we called it transportation, land use, and design. The map that we're including here that kind of pulls that together is the master plan of streets and highways. So this map actually needs to be consistent with the Orange County Transportation Authority's map. And it is somewhat tied into funding. And it's those thoroughfares throughout the county that are going to keep things moving in Orange County in general. So these different colors that you see at the bottom of the slide are different classifications based on the nature and purpose of that street. So for instance, a principal arterial and major arterial, the arterials are going to be busier. They have a little different character as opposed to the secondary arterials or the divided collectors. And again, it's all about safety and efficiency of movement for people and vehicles with a big emphasis on safety. So just a quick visual, it's just to reinforce those different street classifications. They all are associated with different widths. So you can put so many lanes in this particular one, a less one lane here. And then of course, as we get to our collectors and commuters, the streets are smaller as well. So what's in the new general plan, the lines you see highlighted here are the 20 or so streets that are proposed for reclassification. So in some cases, for instance, up here on Flower, it's actually proposed to take that out of the regional OCTA's plan because we want to downgrade it as appropriate as a local street so that instead of its future having the potential to be 2 lanes in each direction, we want to roll that back and lock in place that it'll be 1 lane in each direction. So that's one where we pulled back. In other cases, there's some streets where we're proposing to reduce the width classification or the number of lanes to accommodate bike paths. In particular, some protected bike lanes, like what you're seeing on Bristol, everyone's kind of seeing those protected bike lanes. So some of the streets, in order to get those safe bike lanes, need to reduce a lane. And we'll go on, I'll give you a quick visual of that in a moment. So here's an example. On the left here, this would be one, an example would be Standard Avenue, where we're proposing to reduce it down to a divided collector instead of an arterial. So what that would do, instead of it, right now it has in some locations 1 lane, in a few locations 2 lanes. Its long-term future would be 1 lane only in either direction with a turn lane in the middle, which would allow for a buffer. So this would be striped, but create that distance, that safety distance, and then the bike path on either side, and then some landscaping, again, to make it complete on multiple levels. The other example to the right would be one that you might see on First Street. So First Street now has 3 lanes going in either direction, but to accommodate safe bike movement, it's proposed a protected bike lane. So this sort of light red color would be a raised median protected, and reclassifying that street to a primary arterial would be required to implement that complete street. So the last component of the mobility element is sustainable transportation. So that includes goals and actions that relate to making sure we're using state-of-the-art science and technology and design standards, that we're focusing on attractive and safe best practices, and that we're supporting conservation, as exemplified by this picture on our Bristol Street improvements. So this is a lot of words on it. So But this is just kind of a stopping point to then share just a few samples of the policies and the actions that are in the draft mobility element that help achieve those goals we just touched on. So from a policy standpoint, we're affirming a balanced multimodal network. And that's to provide equitable multimodal circulation that reflects not only our current need, but our changing needs over time. So that would be a policy. The second one that says complete streets, that's a policy commitment to transform our travel ways to accommodate all users through street design and amenities that could include trees, landscaping, street furniture, bus shelters, to cover the whole experience of a complete street. And last but not least, another example is enhanced street design. So again, keeping the character, function, and aesthetics, the beauty of the travelway, but also including the medians where appropriate, bike lanes, public art, and such. So those are 3 examples of policies. And then related actions on the right-hand side, the upper right is kind of a technical thing, but it's key, and that is to update the city's standard plans, which is something Public Works oversees, so that we can have complete street design strategies. And it's a little technical, but so that when new development comes in, we have cut sheets or we have specific standards that identify everything that needs to be in that public realm. And last but not least, street improvements incorporate those low impact development strategies, which basically translates to those things that help filtrate, treat, and harvest the stormwater runoff from street improvement projects. So that's just one example. So with that, I could pause for a moment if you'd like, and we could talk through any mobility questions, or I can move through the open space and we can have questions at the end. Sarah, preference?
Any commissioners have any questions regarding mobility? Commissioner Albrecht?
Yeah, I just have one question. So I think it was on page 9 PDF of PowerPoint. You showed 2 sort of cross sections of streets.
These right there.
One was, I think, First Street. There was a red marking. Is that raised or is that any?
That's raised. So the red one would be raised. So it's
I think people feel safe.
yes, that's the preferred one. Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions, man. Thank you. In the space between the red and the other sidewalk, who cleans that area and how often? So when I'm driving down there, I see bottle drops and
It would be the city, and as this is a newer design for us, a public works director is working with the street cleaning company to have them address the narrow width of the bike path and looking at equipment that can help to address the street sweeping and maintenance issue. So that is something that has been made aware to our public works department. They are working on a solution.
I think it's very mechanical and to address something that Mr. Hannah brought up, and because it's in their economic health as part of the vision, we hire local youth.
I think that's a policy question and not necessarily something that will be addressed in more programmatically at the implementation level rather than at the general plan. But I think those are very good goals to have. And we are constantly addressing how do we activate our local workforce, our local volunteers in the local organizations. So definitely something that the city will be looking at.
The state plan for the general plan update, which you incorporate a lot of those things, what permeates in each of the paragraphs and chapters is this issue of economic health. And as I read that and I read our general plan, I keep wondering, what does that mean? And what can I see? And it says that you could do it by regulations, you could do it by area specific planning to incorporate in there. I guess my question is that after the adoption of the plan that we got to take that word? Or do we have a chance now to incorporate that as a goal to incorporate the hiring of local people in terms of the environmental needs? And I say that because historically, when people came up in the 1920s, because there was a revolution down south, and because America needed workers, they were set aside in little colonial environments. And through a series of laws and planning and all that, the economic vitality was never increased, but it was segregated and it's been addressed. And those barrios still exist today. They're very historic. Barrio Logan, Santa Monica, Yellow High, Lacey, these are all neighborhoods. And as I see in the general plan, they've been gutted by development. There's no reinvestment of all these trees. There's no reinvestment of open space. There's no reinvestment of job creating kinds of activity. And I'm not blaming you, just recently on whatever I had to kind of look at the history of the migration of family from Mexico. And as I began reading that, I saw the whole city planning process of districts coming up. And then, well, John over there woke me up again with the need to hire people and incorporate that into our plan as we approve these planning projects with developers. And we discussed a lot of this the last time we approved the development project. So when we talk about affordable housing, residents cannot afford housing. Part of it has to do with income, although it's not our charge. I understand that. Somewhere along the line, you need to put a little incentive to do that, because how can we reach the economic health? So I'm sorry for going on, Mr. Chair. I just all of a sudden it just started writing as I listened to the testimony, I listened to the testimony, I said, oh, that's kind of great. You know, the rocks will keep the homeless people from sleeping there, and who's going to clean that? And, you know, these things kind of rise. And said, it was that opportunity for job creation.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to sound like it's not.
Oh, no, we're happy to hear your thoughts on all of those things.
Commissioner Calderon, you had some comments. Commissioner Lawson.
I'm going to go back to page, explain to me what was happening to Flower Street.
So Flower Street right now has a designation on our master plan of streets and highways and OCTA to, in the future, allow for 2 lanes in each direction. So clearly that's not anything that has been thought of or proposed to actually happen, but we want to take the opportunity to officially redesignate that street. So it's back to a local street, just like all other residential areas are. But somewhere back in time, Flower was identified as more of a primary collector, which would have allowed more lanes. So we want to.
There was traffic mitigation done on Flower Street a number of years back. And so the idea was to keep less traffic off of Flower Street and more traffic.
Right, and that's been the practical reality, but on paper, this is a sleeping giant that we want to put to rest, that in the future, that's erased and it's preserved as is. And this redesignation affirms that preservation.
Okay, the interesting thing about it is that on top of everything else, you know, that section is going to be part of what's considered the historic designation.
Right.
And that's been submitted to the state of California,
right,
as well as the federal.
Right.
And we're expecting to hear back on that within the next couple of months.
That's exciting.
And nothing was ever described, you know, there was never a description or any information provided that this could be a 2-lane street.
Yeah, so I would offer that this redesignation is good news. It just further preserves what we have, right? So,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, so it's good news. Yeah, and it's something that no one really, was on the radar, but when as we were updating this over the last few years, it was identified as an appropriate cleanup so that it is preserved.
The one thing else has to be considered too, there is that 6 in the morning till about 9:30 in the morning, no right-hand turn onto Flower Street from Memory.
Mhm.
But then they go across the street, make a U-turn, and there is no sign that says you can't make a left-hand turn. So the traffic goes across the street and turns around, which is the use of the situation, as well as people don't even pay attention to that sign.
Right.
So there still needs to be something to mitigate that traffic at this point.
So what you're speaking of is kind of a localized traffic plan, which the Public Works typically will work with each neighborhood to try and find whatever tools are available to mitigate those things. Right, Zed? So it sounds like it's time to have a conversation. Yeah, but the good news is that this will be preserved in one lane in either direction. Yeah,
Thanks for the clarification.
sure. Thanks for the question.
And, Mr. Ross, you have any comments?
Yes, I do. Can we please go back to the slide showing the opt-outs?
So what?
The opt-outs, all of the transit lines that come through.
Oh, OCTA, sorry.
OCTA.
That's the one you want here, I think.
I'm wondering if I know that we're not seeing all the rules and policies right now, and implementation measures, but I'm wondering if one of them that is there that the city is considering is ensuring that all of these routes are maintained. I know in the past, Optum made changes to some of the Santa Ana's most used routes, and that really affected the ridership and the ability for Santa Ana residents to rely on public transit to get around the city. So I'm wondering if the city is looking at that, and I know that might be a little bit more policy oriented.
There is, that's a great question. Thank you for it. There is a policy in there in our element that talks about working with OCTA on these corridors. And I think if I can go back to these in particular. So all of Santa Ana, because we have historically had such a high transit rate, all of our streets are high quality transit routes. But in particular, so we look to work with OCTA, and that's Public Works takes the lead on that, to be mindful of whenever they're changing their bus routes and all of that, so that our community is being served. And then I would just emphasize that in particular, these routes are important to us as well, because if we're planning, for instance, on Harbor, when the Harbor specific plan was adopted, it was based on the fact that there would be more transit there. And so we're very mindful of, if we're putting more denser development on one of the corridors, it's connected to that transit. But on the broader picture with all of their routes, well, this is the bikeway one, sorry, all of their routes, Public Works is at the table with OCTA lobbying for our riders and our community.
Great, I'm happy to hear that. On a similar note, if it's also not already a policy or something that's being considered, I would encourage the city to also lobby for reduced or waived fees for Santa Ana residents. So I know that that's something that just most recently happened with their new youth bus pass, where anybody under 18 will be able to ride the bus for free. They're doing a pilot program right now.
Nice.
And I know that's a result of a lot of advocating, including from City of Santa Ana staff and the initiative staff, Scott Pittner at some OC Streetcar stakeholder meetings. A lot of you have been working on that policy for the last 4 years.
Mhm.
And I think that's a great way to start. And I hope that the city, I don't know if it's something to be included in the general plan, but knowing that Santa Ana has such high ridership and that we're now going to have the streetcar, and there have been a lot of neighborhood concerns around who's going to use that streetcar. Where we have a family of 4, they're not going to be able to afford $20 in fare for 1 day of use. So I'd just like to encourage you all to consider formally adding that as a policy, or just making that a practice to, whenever possible, advocate for reduced or waived bus fare and streetcar fare, whatever it may be for Santa Ana.
So we can certainly have that conversation and see how that works in context of Santa Ana versus Orange County and equity throughout the county. And how one would begin.
All county residents can get it, that would be great.
Very good. Yeah, and that pilot program you just mentioned, thank you for sharing that. And we also, a few years back, had a program with Santa Ana College where they gave free passes for a certain amount of time or discounts to encourage the college students to use transit as well. And we've also talked to OCTA about somewhere in time doing that with some of our new residential projects, so on these transit lines to coordinate with our multifamily developers and try and make a win-win there as well.
Yeah, that would be great, especially thinking about the waste neighborhood, and there's about 5 affordable housing developments that will all be, one that will be just coming, Legacy Square, but Santiago is there, and Seeds Development has 3 agri-gap developments there, and then there's a related. So all of those are gonna be within a 2 to 5 minute walk to the street car, so we can incentivize those residents to use that.
It'll be exciting to queue all of that up when it's ready to go, the streetcar's ready to go.
That's all right.
Thank you. Commissioner Fan.
Yes, just basically just off my own personal around the city. And I think our street crew so far is great. It's very, and visually, I think for visitors and for residents, as they see the city improve on the day-by-day basis, it feels nice. But as I think on your last presentation, there was a noise element that you presented, and I was moving with some thoughts. We're envisioning higher density, or I would say higher density, but we're envisioning more mixed use and more residential buildings are adjacent to these corridors. And what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of there's a lot of traffic in these corridors, which they're obviously designed for larger lanes, amount of lanes, but then I wonder if there's any way for us to kind of promote development that are more adjacent to the streets, promote more livelier corridor, but also protect the future residents of those development from noise, from all vehicle traffic that.
So that's something for us to look at with our urban design and our development standards, and also the public realm improvements. There's the construction of a building and the windows and such that'll help mitigate noise, but there's also landscaping. And so we can be mindful of that as we refine our development standards. Thank you for that point.
I do see there's new developments. I'm sure as the newer developments, there's going to be sound isolation and opening windows, but then there's also apartments that are, I'm speaking specifically at Harvard, that are adjacent to the Harvard Boulevard. I think for construction movements a bit older,
right?
I think would benefit from more noise control.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. I do have a couple comments. I'm really excited about the cycle tracks, and they have a lot great element of safety and convenience, and encourage cycle riding instead of riding. So those are great in terms of sustainability. I think also what I'm not seeing is a stated goal regarding accessibility. I think with all the government buildings and high density housing downtown, creating a more walkable downtown is super important. The statistics are pretty compelling on how much more desirable a place would be to live if we do that. So I'd like to see that.
Very good. We do have one graphic that we didn't show today that has to do with pedestrian, but certainly we'll make note of that and see where we can make sure it's strong.
Thank you. Continue the
Certainly. Thank you. All right, on to the next important thing, one of the next important things, and that's open space. So just refresher, obviously open space, the intention is to identify it, preserve it, and see how we can grow it to enrich the quality of life, not just for recreation, but also for wildlife conservation in the areas that it's appropriate, and also for aesthetics. Big emphasis on recreation though. So this particular element has three primary goals. The first one is parks, open space, and recreation. And then the next category is health, safety, and inclusive opportunities. And the third one is park maintenance, stewardship, and sustainability. So this particular slide is just to share the basics of the inventory. This page called Open Space Resources is in the draft open space element, and there are some refinements that we will be making to it, but on a few things, like for instance, I'll give you one. There's Grisette Park, which is on the list now, which will come off eventually. In the final draft is what we would propose, in that park, while the city owns it, there's an agreement with Santa Ana Unified that it can only be used for Santa Ana Unified, and it's gated off and such. So we want to be authentic in our data. So we'll be correcting that along the way and to match the environmental impact report as well. But general, the city parks and recreation facilities, the number, the acres we've calculated is 343 acres and some. And so to put that in context with our population, that gives us 1.03 acres per 1,000 residents. And on the next slide or two, we'll talk about what our standard is. And just for some more background, there's other open space resources as well that are not counted in this parks to resident ratio. And that's because these other open spaces, in this case being our two golf courses, are not within the city of Santa Ana's control, if you will. So we don't count those. Another thing that we haven't counted in that 300 plus number is our joint use agreements with Santa Ana Unified. We're allowed to use those. They each have slightly different criteria, but we don't have 100% accessibility to our residents. So those are set separate. And then another open space resource that we want to at least acknowledge in the bigger scheme of things is our Class 1 bikeways, our trails, and those open space improvements, like Maple Halliday would be one example, the Class 1 bikeway. So this particular slide, this map is in actually the environmental document. So we talked last time that we've recirculated the program EIR, but it's only a few chapters that are being reviewed, and one has to do with recreation. So this map in the purple pink color, I'll go with purple, that identifies the underserved areas. And that was calculated on this map by looking at the community parks and measuring a half-mile service radius around those parks. For the smaller neighborhood parks, it was a fourth mile. And those that were not accessible, if you will, or in that service area, are the purple areas. And these are residential areas for the most part. Actually, this one kind of covers all the gamut because the northeast part of that map, very bottom right, has a lot of industrial uses right now. But so what we've also overlaid on here is you can see the 5 focus areas, and they're each identified by black boundaries. And so as part of the environmental, we looked at where are the focus areas that have the most efficiency, if you will. So you can see that it's hard to see with the little picture up there, but the 17th and Grand focus area has a little patch of purple there, more significant. And then the southwest corner of 55 and Dyer has less service area. And then as you can see, South Main closer to the downtown as well. So that's just to give you a sense of why the recreation component of CEQA, we've gone back and it's been, we're showing it as a significant environmental impact. So to frame it in slightly another way, the existing population in the upper left, we're using the 2019 population number that's also referenced in the environmental, because the 2020 is out, it's slightly different. But for the 334,000 plus population with that acreage number that I gave you, that's where you get the 1.03. If we fast forward and we look at the 2045 build out, the theoretical build out from the land use element growth projections, it would take us to 407,000 population. And with that, if we did no more adding of parks, we would be at 0.8 acres per thousand. Again, it's a theoretical build out, but just to put things in perspective. So once again, it's a significant impact. Now, what I'd like to share, again, it's going to be a lot of words and such, but over the last few months with the community input, with some additional conversation with our Parks and Recreation staff, and even their consultant that's helping with the park master plan. So side note, the park master plan is still under development. Its recommendations and such are not complete. But this would be, if you will, what we have to offer as far as ways to potentially soften that impact and mitigate our the impacts on our parks and recreation. So upper left, first one as a policy is to create and regularly update the master plan to guide the acquisition, development, and maintenance of all of our parks and open space to meet our community needs. And then the other policy that's in the draft is to maintain our 2 acres per parkland per 1,000 residents, and affirm that still in our general plan. And then the last one, as an example, we'd like to share is, this is part of this policy, and that is for new development within these park deficient areas, those purple areas, and environmental justice areas, to prioritize the creation of new parks and the dedication of that land over the collection of impact fees. So again, action-oriented is the intention. And then the bullet points on the right, I'm just going to kind of highlight what some of those mean. So again, these are actions that are intended to get us further along on our goals for the 2.2 per thousand and such. So the first one is the creation of an interagency team. Now, for some, that may not seem like that big of a deal, but it's an opportunity for city staff to get together and be talking amongst ourselves so that we can be sharing across silos, if you will, make sure there are no silos, and working together to find where those opportunities are for new parks. And then the second one was an idea is to hold ourselves accountable and have an annual open space summit, if you will. And that would be to convene annually. It would be with city staff, community leaders, and private enterprise to affirm our goals for park acquisition and to review, if you will, a status report of measurements for how we're doing on that progress. So again, accountability and working together, collaborating. The third new idea, if you will, is the idea as an action for a park opportunity fund. And that's, if you were to reference it back in the element, it's Open Space Action 1.5. And that's to mindfully incorporate general fund, cannabis revenues, private donations into an established park opportunity fund so that that's set aside, if you will, and that can be leveraged for matching grants, which provide obviously a greater opportunity as they arise for new park acquisition. So then the next one to bring to your attention is the notion of parkland requirement for larger residential developments. So bear with me, this one's a little bit longer, a little bit more involved. And again, it's the idea of an action item to move towards this. So I'll highlight it right now. So the idea is to update the city's existing residential development fee for larger residential projects. And the intention would be to require public parkland within a 10-minute walking distance of these new residential developments. and to also consider developers look at exploring a reduction of on-site open space or somehow giving some credit for park dedication of some of their property. So again, we're just exploring the different opportunities. And then as well, establish some types of incentives for coordination between multiple residential developments or projects that might be in proximity so that we could work together to get a larger site, because those little pocket parks are great, but they don't quite give you the same opportunity. And so again, we're looking at incentives. And so that at least is to help frame what the intention is for that particular action. So that will take a good amount of effort and innovation and best practices, but that's one that has is a good opportunity. And then the last two I'd like to highlight, the other one is the Park Foundation. And that's actually to establish a 501c3 Park and Recreation Foundation to establish fundraising supports, again, for Santa Ana's park system, communication protocols, and just, again, having another opportunity for fundraising, because we know this effort is going to take a lot to bring up our parks and recreation services. And last but not least is the community partnerships. Short-term and long-term, we're going to really need to work with our partners. That includes our community serving organizations, includes Santa Ana Unified School District, and working together to see where we can have agreements to use their sites and allow these areas to be open and increase our programming and our parks and services on the ground. So again, this is what we have to share to try and lean in to solving our parks problem and to mitigate some of the impacts that would be further felt through the proposed development in the land use element. So, so I think I'll pause on that note. I'm assuming there'll be a few questions.
Yes, thank you. I'll open it up to the commission for questions. Comments. Commissioner already. Commissioner McLaughlin.
Yeah, just going back to your wish list here of implementation actions. I mean, if you had to dollarize each of those items, what do we think that we'd be looking at? I mean, is it something, if you had, park opportunity fund, park foundation, are we looking at a couple $1 million, or are we looking at $100 million?
I don't know that the conversation has gotten that far. I think as the park master plan is completed,
Right.
they'll be able to better quantify what that opportunity might need to be, or make a recommendation. Unless y'all have anything else to share, would that be fair to say? So I think what month would you say the parks master plan is proposed to be complete? Ballpark?
April 2022.
So April 2022 is when the Parks Master Plan is to be completed, I guess. Yeah, so to answer your question, we don't have a number associated with those. I think that's a much bigger thing.
It sounds good. It's just, where's the money to,
Yeah.
where's the money coming from, and how much do we think we got practical opportunity?
And I don't know, again, we go to the experts on this sort of thing. And like, for instance, the Friends of the Zoo or the Friends of the Library, there's organizations that do this sort of thing. So I think we would be pulling in some experts to help us identify what's our need, but what's realistic and that sort of thing.
Sure. And I think this is absolutely right. Number one, in terms of quantifying, we'll know a lot better in terms of how much things would cost when we have that park master plans. In terms of how much can we gather and are we able to sock away with some of these funds, that's also something else that we'll have to determine. And as we move forward, it's going to be the city council that set that policy. But to give you an example of the fee that we currently assessed for residential development, providing for park acquisition fund. You know, we generally get a few $1 million that we have. I think right now it's approximately $3 million that we would have if we were able to use that money towards acquisition. And if you were to look at, you know, the cost per acre of land, that's not very many. You know, you probably get 2 or 3 acres of land with that amount of money. So undoubtedly, it's going to be a significant amount that's required in order to get to where we want to go. The plan is not to just depend on that, but also to look at other opportunities through partnership, as well as working with our development standards to look at how the private sector can be a part of providing space for new residents as well. So it's a combination strategy. There's practicality. I mean, it was just, I saw something not too long ago. The CEO of QVC, the founder of QVC, spent $24 million to turn Pier New York into a park. And it's factored in down for another $20 million. That'd be great to see something like that. Absolutely. We're not New York City either. No, but I think we do have opportunities as we set up these types of programs, working for the communities in the past. We have had organizations such as California Community Foundation that donated in the past. So it's not to say that, you know, that those opportunities are available all the time, but they do come up. And, you know, the private organization, nonprofits, and foundation, there are open space and park, as well as sustainable type foundations that provide grants for this.
Thank you. Commissioner Wu, any questions, comments?
Well, you can incorporate open space design, which I think you have with some of the affordable housing projects that we see Central, so that makes it useful for residents, and also make community use. I don't think we have a lot of land for the big developments that we can have Central Park. So I think we have to look at the remnant parks, pieces of property that we have. And if you look at the remnants, then what kind of design they have that does not take water? Trees, because we have a problem with watering trees that we have. And that's been one of the complaints that come up to the association. So I think you're headed toward goal in terms of looking at partnership and also setting aside some opportunity perhaps to offer access to different people. I don't know, but the issue that I find is you both you're lacking parking space too. In reference to the last presentation on transportation, on 17th and Harbor, where the McDonald is, that's Garden Grove. But it butts to the trolley side. There's a Chinese restaurant there. I've been trying the whole week to go there, but I can't get parking. But the parking at every slot is filled. And then I became curious, so I camped out for the day to see what happened. A lot of the cars stayed there all day. And then I started noticing people getting off the buses because it's where bus lines are stopped. So apparently, they were using it as a transfer point. That is good on the local businesses there. So all raised there because these things kind of dovetail. I don't know if it was temporary due to COVID-19 and it's really kind of for people. I don't know. I just want to be aware that as we do these studies, these things kind of avalanche. One day trigger something else. And as we go about our daily business, we start noticing things. people speaking and that, so you get a walkable city, I hope there are people that will walk. With the bike lane, I hope people use the bike lane. But I see a lot more uses of cars because people here. So, you know, issues, that's not saying. So, but it's happy, the happiest thing I have is watching, the father and mother playing with their own children in the park, playing soccer or whatever, it's a place for that. And I think Weston's work hard, and I think we need some aesthetic value in the Asian, a lot does it for me. You know, lots of plants, and
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos.
Yes, I have a question and then some comments. My first question is, how many, or I don't know really how many, but the joint use agreement or agreements that the city has with the San Antonio Unified School District, how many schools or community centers is that with, and how much open space is that providing? I wasn't sure if the acreage on the slide reflected just the facilities that those agreements exist with, or that acreage reflected all of the open space that CUSD has and what it could be if there was an agreement with each of the facilities.
So the 30.6 acres is just the existing shared agreements and the area, if you will, that we have agreements to use for part of the day or after school or whatever it might be.
And
It does. It's just a handful of like 5 or 6. Susie, Ron, do you want to speak to it? Do you have the list of the schools? Actually, it's in the table here. So like, sorry, you can, it's Garfield Community Center is counted, Godinez, and then James Muir, Madison, Monte Vista, Roosevelt, Spurgeon, Willard, and Rosita. So those are the only schools right now that we have agreements with. And those acres aren't the whole school. It's just the part that's been negotiated that the city is able to program and use for the community.
so that negotiated space, is what we're seeing on the slide, just the open space, or also include, does that also include the community center space, which isn't open space?
It could include the community center too. So like, for instance, when we, on these, when we, let me get an example where they're.
Garfield.
Mhm.
Does the city have permission to use the field or just the community center?
I believe it's just the community center. Is that correct? I believe it's just the community center.
So then the acres reflected here doesn't reflect open space.
It doesn't it doesn't reflect physical open space. It identifies dance classes or educational classes. So there's a little bit of, gray area there. Yeah.
And then, so is there I know one of the goals or one of the ways to achieve these goals is through community partnerships, and I'm sure that includes the county's agreements. But is there a policy specifically naming an effort to increase the amount of joint use agreements that the city has with San Antonio Unified School District?
Yes, that's definitely on the radar. It's, in talking to Parks and Recreation, there's great hope for that, but it's actually been a bit of a challenge. So we continue to have those conversations, but we wish it was easier to make progress in that area, but it seems to be a lot of work, but we'll keep working at it.
Well, I think all of the goals are great, and I know that a lot of it, as we see them, it seems like we're looking into the future, but I believe that there's also actions that can be taken more immediately, such as looking at Willowick. I know that Willowick is a little harder, but that's a lot of acreage, and if that were to be maintained as open space, I think the amount of acreage per 1,000 residents would double. It would nearly double. I think Willowick is something that we can't forget about. And also a lot of the vacant parcels that are scattered throughout the city, many of them on Bristol. I know many of them are zoned for commercial use. But we've seen items come to this commission for rezoning. So I'd also like to encourage staff to take another look at those. I know that community members and our community organizations have been advocating for many of those to become open space or green space, whether it be a linear park or a community garden. But I would like to see that also incorporated into some of these goals. We know that land is hard to come by. And my fear is that if we sell out that into the highest bidder now, we're never going to be able to meet it. And meeting these goals for increased acreage per resident is going to be very difficult.
Mhm. And hopefully that's where the park master plan will give some additional insight, because, location, to just pick up any location is not as valuable as a good location. So, is Bristol the best candidate? At this point, we're looking for any areas for open space, but is Bristol the best candidate, or is our resources better at another vacant land?
Now, that brings another question, and I don't know if this might be for you or might be better suited for Min, but as the Parks Master Plan is being developed, is the city maybe taking a pause on selling off vacant land that currently exists? Or are those, is that land still up for sale now? And we'll just see kind of what's left once the master park is completed and what is up for, what can be used at that time.
In terms of what the city currently has out for disposition, there are specific parcels that have specific requirements for disposition, some including the former RDA assets where the dissolution of RDA requires that the city dissolve those assets and sell that. But we are trying to acquire and look at what we can do for parks, and that I know staff is actively working on that. Other properties such as the ones on Bristol have specific requirements for transportation levy, and therefore we have to, and maybe Zach can expand on this, but there are parcels that were funded using specific fund that we have to basically dissolve and sell the parcel and repatriate that fund. So where we do have opportunity, the city is constantly looking at what we can do to increase open space. But I think what the park master plan does for us is that it looks at how to best focus the limited resources that we do have in order to obtain the most benefit for what we do acquire. Because we do have to look at not only location, look at how the needs of the population and what type of uses, but also how do we maintain those parks in the future. We do have very limited, not only staffing resources, but funding as well. So the master park plan will help us to, I won't say it's going to solve our entire problem because I don't think it will, but it certainly take us a long way from where we are today to increase our park, but also parks recreation opportunity for residents.
Thank you. And I would just hope that the city can preserve its limited land while the parks master plan is being developed. And regarding the Bristol parcels, I know Caltrans is the owner for many of those types, so hope that the city is having discussions with them to see if there would be any interest in donating that land. I know there were conversations about that around 4 years ago. I don't know if they went anywhere, but I would just like to see stuff as amazing as possible, and I'm sure you're all. And thank you for the effort to do what's important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fan.
To kind of package different developers together to find a solution to the park. I think it's very in the city and into the hopping issue. Because I think there's different cities around Southern California. Most of it is speculative projects, but they do encourage kind of larger big box stores into the city, and as a trade-off, these big box stores will provide rooftop parks or certain parks on site, on the property that would be given over to the community. And we, you know, I think the solution like that, it not only you know, have a developer into the city, but they're not taking additional land, but then you're introducing a more tourist project to park into the city, rather than, you know, have this plot of land getting the development and then look for another piece of land to satisfy a park requirement. That just came to my mind when I hear about the packaging offers.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a comment. I'm really excited about the ideas put forth, the new ideas. I like the, I think developing the partnerships with the district is super important. It's it's the major open space owner in Santa Ana, the city. And the foundation is also critical. It just opens that opportunity for the donation, which Laughlin was talking about, but it also creates an opportunity for an endowment for maintenance, which is also mentioned. Make sure issuing and keeping the parks running and operating in shape. Also, I think there may be a great opportunity for some linear parks. I've seen other cities make use of the basically the rails trails program. I don't know if there's maybe a trade project in there somewhere, but keep that on the radar.
We'd love to get the RL system out.
Yeah.
As you
So,
know.
yeah, so that'd be a great opportunity for some new parks.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Laughlin, you want to comment?
Yeah, a couple of things. Whatever happened to it's not a lot, there's like 3.5 acres, the swamp between Centennial Park and 3 parks that were identified in the city, 3 plots of land, there's still plots of land right now.
I can start on that, but I think Ron will articulate it better. There are a couple of parks that were identified for the trade-off, and I'm going to let Ron, the master, share the details. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you for asking that question. In fact, these are exciting times for the city of Santa Ana. We're doing the brand new general plan, and at the same time, we're doing a park master plan. So this is going to be the turning point of the city of Santa Ana, I guess, as far as I'm concerned, open space. I've been here quite a number of years. I've seen the city grow. I've seen the city change from developing. In fact, if you can pull up that map of the deficiency areas. As you see this map, I'm just going to give you a little history before I answer your question on the land conversion. The city started with Birch Park in the center of the city as the first and the oldest park in the city of Santa Ana. And as the city grew, you can see a donut shape around the city. As we grew, we started to acquire park site, but it was a little too late to cover this deficiency area. So we were eager to buy a lot of park sites around the city, which were farmland or vacant parcels. And that's how it grew. Now we're in a position to attack what we call the deficiency area, which is a harder one to address. Give you a reason. We tried to address it years ago, but it was really difficult because as we look for funding sources to acquire property, to develop property, and going after grants, the state grants require that the property that we acquire for park and open space be acquired through not through eminent domain. It's got to be from a willing seller and through appraised market value. So if we buy it through eminent domain, we cannot go out and compete after grants in the future for that site. So it's a really difficult task to accomplish. To address your question on the land conversion with Centennial Park, we did obtain 3 park sites for that land conversion. And one was the Pacific Electric Park site, which we acquired from the housing department. The other one was Rady Myrtle, same situation. We acquired it through the housing department. And the other one was Mariposa Park, which is a small little park site. And the same situation, it was acquired through housing for residential development, but the community came up on board and says, we don't want any more residential development. We want open space. So we were able to acquire it from the housing department as a willing seller and as at fair market value. And we were able to meet those requirements from the state. So we were able to get state grant money to develop those sites. So that whole process is nearing completion. The state has, the National Park Service has recognized these 3 sites as a swap, a land swap for the Centennial, for portion of the college Centennial Park site. And so we're completing that process right now. There was a glitch in the parcel map at Centennial, which we're trying to clear up with the Department of GSA. That has been cleared up. Now it's back in the Department of National Park Service, and they're going to do the final transfer of the property in the near future. So everything's ready to lock up and be completed on that whole land conversion site. I gave you a lot of information and all you asked for was the 3 parcels. The other thing that I'd like to bring to the commission's attention is as we acquired sites and we developed sites, if you remember, we went through a recession, and through that recession, we couldn't increase our park fees. But at the same time, apartment complex were being developed. We were almost able to meet our 2 acres per thousand at that point. But as the apartment development started to develop, that increased the population, and we stayed status quo on open space. So that's where the numbers went upside down on us. We were close to 2 acres per thousand, and we dropped down to 1 point. In fact, I think it went down to 0.9 acres per thousand, and now we're at 1.3 acres per thousand. The same thing is going to happen with this residential development project that you're going to with the general plan. If we don't keep up with open space, we'll see the same problem occur. And as Melanie showed you, in 2045, if we don't keep up with open space, we're going to be down at 0.8 acres per thousand. So we need to be aggressive in acquiring open space in order to keep up with our development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
I think the one thing I want to go back to this is I think the challenge there has always been who pays for the maintaining those properties. But I know we talked about USP, but we haven't necessarily brought up SAC. And there's some facilities, there that are available. But in some cases, the track, for instance, is open for people to use. But some of the other parts of that campus are not. There's other areas that, we should be looking at. And again, it comes down to how are you going to split the cost of maintaining these things?
Correct.
I agree, because.
Correct.
Ours, the various jurisdiction serves the same population. So I think that's really important as well. And I think there's a fair amount of acreage out there that's with the school districts. I mean, when we did the measure, the bond measure, we actually added, by taking out buildings and the portables, we added 12 plus acres across the district. It's not a lot, but it's 12 plus acres. How much of that could have been utilized for?
Speaking of maintenance, Ron, when will the bathrooms at that center park be? speaking of maintenance, when will the bathrooms at El Salvador Park be renovated?
Bathrooms at El Salvador Park be renovated.
Oh, El Salvador?
Yeah.
El Salvador Park is being renovated right now. In fact, we just installed a fitness court at El Salvador Court. We in the process of completing the plans, or actually, no, we completed the plans. We're actually going to start construction of renovating the basketball court, starting pretty soon. We've also got plans to put in a splash pad at El Salvador Court. Now those monies we need to acquire, but we have the planning monies to design it. So we're doing that. So the El Salvador Park is moving along. And one of the things as we make these improvements, we need to expand the parking lot because we've got a lot of items in there that's going to generate more use of the park site. So our next phase is to find the funding to expand the parking lot to accommodate those facilities.
And I'm sure Ron's going to put a lot of bike racks and bike lockers. in there
Right,
too.
right.
It goes around and around, right?
Thank you so much, Ron.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say what a treasure it is to have Ron Ono on staff. For those that aren't familiar, Ron's been here forever. He's a design guru. He's a visionary. We're just really lucky to have him. So thanks, Ron, and Susie too. Yeah. So to kind of wrap up the presentation, I just, oh, sorry.
The population of youth, age population, is that decreasing? I thought that at one point it was rising, but I thought I saw a newspaper article about it decreasing. That's why they shuffle around some of the schools, and in the next 10, 20 years of the plan, what will it be? And will those schools be available repurposed?
I think you bring up a good point for us to go back and look at the trends.
I'm sure the school district can probably provide a better answer and more exacting trend, but from what conversation I've had with school district staff, it appears that the trend is that they're consolidating.
I think it's important to keep that conduit open because we need to be on top of what campuses might become available. It's surplus if that happens.
I mean, you gotta worry about top 39 because if you end up making the school building, then the charter would say that's fine. I think that so the challenge is there. But I think to answer Alan's question, I remember that this I looked at over the next 5 to 10 years is about 10,000 students less than what is there. And that's sort of our level, although it appears that enrollment at all levels is higher than what was anticipated in the plan. But it's still not, it's not the right direction. I mean, census wise, what we lost 14,000. That's not students, that's population.
Right.
So we know that the direction we're going in is not up.
Shall I just finish my last couple slides? Okay, so then just to recap and remind that, so we've been talking about recreation and open space along with mobility. And so there's a public comment period on the environmental related to recreation as it's been added as a significant impact. And so for our next couple of opportunities to keep working on the general plan, I'll pause for the moment just to remind you have a flyer, I think, that you all may have be aware of, that this Saturday there's an open house for environmental justice. And it's actually, we took one more opportunity to have an in-house session to invite particularly the environmental justice community, but the community as a whole, to see what we heard. And I think you got a copy of the EJ outreach at your last meeting, and then to share with them too some of the policies that were revised or strengthened through that extra outreach. So we're looking forward to that on Saturday. And then back to the environmental and recreation, that review period will close September 20th. And as it's not required, but our protocol in Santa Ana is to have a public hearing, a planning commission, to invite comments on that, in this case, the recirculated EIR. So that will be September 13th. We also have the opportunity on that date to have an additional study session. So we will be working on that. And then a month later, we will be coming to Planning Commission to consider action on the general plan as a whole. And then the goal being to get to City Council in November. So with that, we are open, as we mentioned last time, to any suggestions from the commission on areas they would like us to elaborate on further. But we look forward to the next couple of times we'll be meeting with you on this subject.
Commissioners have any additional comments? Sorry. Mr. Wu.
The citizens overlap certain jurisdictions, and I'm glad that it is on topic of the school district and all that. And again, speaking of the economic health, I think we need to invent something to demonstrate the economic health. My friend Michael Cedar, the superintendent of the Anaheim School District, got into a partnership with Microsoft, training students for jobs that start at $60 a year. That goes a long way to improve the income in order to afford the housing. And John reminded me that there's opportunity for this kind of partnership if we get on the economy, which is started back when President Obama was president, and we saw an influx of new jobs, whether it's in weatherization, solar energy, but there are also other jobs related to that can be done with little skills, the inspectors, the salary, and like that. So while general plan doesn't do everything, setting the goal or making the statement that these things can be done, these things can be targeted in the low income community, where you have specific area plans for the research and development. So some of those transportation and then type of companies that gets incentive for new tax credits and an opportunity zone may lend itself to these things we think for connection with our Santa Ana College, Chelsea Longview, or whatever. I know this kind of discussion at my own college, alma mater, College, one of my kids fell on the street and got $250 million for creating a center for climate change and environment. Now, what does that mean? We're looking at water, we're looking at architecture, they're looking at just creating arts and moving in it and play along the green corridor of opportunity. So I think that the plan follows a vocation in California, follows a vocation for let's start reading that versus just seeing us as the labor force of Orange County, which would happen historically. But let's see if we can be, the workforce of the future.
Mr. Ramos,
Yes, I just had a question for staff. So I know several community members have attended general plan and environmental workshops on their environmental business development for the last 2-3 years. I'm wondering if the city has a list of all those individuals that have attended, specifically their emails, and if they can receive just a notice, it can be the same language as used in the next one, that we'll be having a public hearing, just so that they're aware, in case they're not receiving next alerts.
Sure.
Because we know they're interested, particularly within the event, it'd be great if they can receive that sort of personal invitation.
So typically for any upcoming meetings. We have a list of interested parties. So we have the Nixle that goes out, and then we also have another email blast that goes out to the interested parties. So those folks that have attended environmental justice or prior general plan meetings should be on that extra email.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Did we have any public comments on that? Or we opened it to the public?
We did, we are, yeah, John.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great presentation.
Just out of curiosity, one of the things that was mentioned earlier about free busing and things like that for the students and such, it is free to the students, but in reality, I think the district, but the college is keeping in a certain amount of money. Is that, John?
I think so.
Yes, I'm just not sure how much, but I will get back to staff on that.
SAC was like $300,000
Oh,
when they started the program off for free bus. And SAC, had to put it through 300,000 for that.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
I didn't hear that. Oh, well, we'll find out the answer to that because it's a good thing to know for our partnering sorts of things.
Yeah.
All
right.
Good job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to commissioner comments. If any commissioners have any general comments? Commissioner McCall? Any general comments at this point? I think that concludes the staff's presentation.
Correct. We have one. My only comment is that I'd like to close this meeting and adjourn in honor of Peter Bass, who recently passed away. Peter has been a very strong supporter of the community. He's been part of the common for many years. He's done a lot to move things in a positive direction. He's also a veteran of the Vietnam War, and he's been very instrumental in trying to get the new cemetery down in the Green Park area. And he's just been an all-around genuine person who's tried to help out those around him. Close that.
I'd like to second that motion. Peter has been fixed the road. City council meeting next year. If you miss the meeting, they ask you to work them on. But his passion for the city is incredible. It comes out to support other neighborhoods. With passing, we passed, reminds us that living alone and being senior is natural is favorable. We speak like his work in the community.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay. I move that we adjourn this meeting in honor of Peter Cass. Thank you for his service to the city.
Thanks.
Meeting adjourned.